Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and welcome back to Joanna the Medium Show. Tonight is going to be an exciting show, and to be honest with you, I'm a little bit nervous because my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful friend Stephanie is going to interview me. I have no idea what she's going to ask me. When her and I get together and chat, there's sparks everywhere. We could talk forever. She's an intuitive person, extraordinarily intuitive, very, very gifted, very connected to spirit, way more than she thinks she is. And actually, that's a funny thing between us. And bottom line is, I love her to pieces. So we decided that she's going to do an interview with me, and apparently one of few. So I hope you guys like this. But just like you, I have no idea what's coming. So all the information that's going to come out of my mouth is completely unscripted and not prepared. So I'm a little bit nervous, just like trying to get on a roller coaster, which by the way, I hate roller coasters. And let's take it away. Okay, Stephanie, my beautiful, beautiful friend. Hello.
Hi, honey. Yeah, to kind of throw us both under the nervous bus. And I haven't told Joanna this because it happened right before we started the call, but I had really been sitting for a couple days knowing that you and I were going to talk and thinking about, what would people most love to know about you and what are the things that I still don't know about you. And I know a lot about you, though, and I had these beautiful pages of questions sitting in front of me, and about 10 to 15 minutes before now, my guide started talking and gave me about 15 more questions, and then right before I called in here, they said, let us ask the questions tonight. So this makes me mildly nerve-wracked, too, which is going to be even more fun to see what happens. And you and I both are big believers in following our intuition, so this is going to be really not what I expected. And as a fellow control freak, for anybody listening out there, this should be even more interesting. So so shall we? Well,
I literally feel like
poke around?
Stepping into something. Yeah, let's just go for it.
Oh yeah, we're both kind of on the edge of something really interesting. So I'm glad you guys can be here and play with us. I just want to start too by just saying how much because I love Joanna so much, and our meeting was so divinely choreographed. My father, who is deceased, is alive and kicking in terms of choreographing miracles in my life, and bringing her into my life has been extraordinary and such a gift. And I'm just hoping that all of you get to be really inspired by what she's created and who she is, and the real Joanna that I get to know, who is beautiful and hysterical and so ridiculously normal. Like, we're two chicks who, talk to spirits and guides and dead people, and we are really kind of, I'm gonna say it, Joanna, we're kind of campy. We have a little bit of an irreverent side. So I just want everyone to get to know and fall as madly in love with you as I am. So I think this will be really fun. And I think I'm going to learn a lot, too, because some of these questions, I'm hoping I'm interpreting my guides because they were talking so fast. I am scribbling notes. So you may have to fill in the blanks, Joanna, of like what they're talking about. So this is actually, thank you for giving me this opportunity, too.
I'm so nervous right now. It's not even funny.
Oh, this is going to be hysterical. So one of the things that, and I'm really going off of, because they specifically said to let them ask the questions. So I guess I'm actually supposed to look at their questions, not the beautiful ones that I wrote out. One of the first things that they were telling me is they wanted me to ask you how you got brave enough to do this work on YouTube, and then then I want to poke around a little bit in some work questions. But it is such a brave thing that most of us can't wrap our heads around.
Well, it's really interesting because I actually just got dizzy for a moment, and that tells me there's some spirits stepping into my aura. It was actually really interesting because in October of 2 years ago, I believe that was in 2015, I clearly heard a voice that said to me, get on YouTube. And I literally said, what the F for? Because for those of you who don't know me, I may look to you very confident, but I have struggled with my own power, sense of power, for most of my life. And this is something that I talked about in an interview that's posted on my website. So when I heard them say that to me, get on YouTube, I literally said, what the F am I going to do there? They said, you're going to read cards. And I said, I have no freaking clue how to read cards because I don't read cards. I'm not a card reader. I don't profess to be one. I don't even try to be one because I tried it for so long. It simply doesn't work. It is simply not my gift. So yes, I do see cards and I get information from them, but it's not the traditional way that people read, professional card readers. So then I said, how the hell am I going to read cards when I don't know how to read cards? And they literally said, we will tell you exactly what to say. Pick a deck, pick a spread, put the cards out. We'll tell you the messages. So that's what it started. So what I did was I created a YouTube channel and I sat on it for about 6 months. And I kind of created it and I left it there. So I thought, okay, it's done now. And 6 months later, I did nothing with it. And they said, when are you going to start doing your videos? And I said again, what the hell for? What am I going to do? And again, they said, you got to read cards. People need to get to know you. Now, for those of you, well, obviously, most of you don't know me. Because I struggled with my sense of self, this is where it's getting a little bit interesting. Most of my life, I have been feeling like I was nothing. The message I received when I was very young is that I was always going to be nothing. No one would ever love me. So, and it was actually a close relative of mine. I won't go into details what it is at this point, but I received that message over a period of a long time, and that eventually stuck. And I didn't feel very much about myself, and I didn't feel I was loved or even worthy of love. So the idea of getting on YouTube and presenting myself to the world with the feeling of not being worthy, that was terrifying for me, absolutely terrifying. But they kept pressing on, and I finally said, oh, okay. So one day I sat down. I was so nervous. I was literally about to throw up. And I did record my first video. And if you ever go back to my first video, you'll notice how I was very nervous. And eventually that's how it started. So, that kind of puts it out there that, yes, I'm a regular person. And the reason why I absolutely love and am passionate about helping people be empowered is because that's where I come from lack of having it. So I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit.
I personally could ask you about an hour's worth of questions about what that was like, that the nerve-wrackingness, because I think so many of us have so many fears, and the fact you were willing and able to do that is pretty impressive. I'm actually just going to follow the order because they're jumping around a little bit in the timeline of your life, but I trust how it was coming through. I'm actually just surrendering it to them. But here's the next question they were asking me to tell you, or to request of you, to tell us how you were using intuition before you started the YouTube channel, when you were in your corporate world. Like, what was that like? Being a normal person.
That's a great question. When I look back, I always was intuitive, but I didn't know I was because I didn't know people were, like there was any difference between me and other people. So now I know that we are all intuitive, and some are more than others. Some may pay more attention to it than others. But as I was always fairly intuitive, and I always felt things without knowing why I felt them. Now, because I didn't have a very high sense of value or belief in myself, most of the time I would dismiss what I would be feeling. And also coming from a background where I was emotionally abused when I was quite young, I was sexually abused, and coincidentally or because of it, I have attracted relationships, work and personal, that were emotionally abusive. So listening to my intuition was not something that I did fairly often because I didn't believe in myself, and not believing in myself would not, it wouldn't be congruent to listening to my intuition. But eventually, as I got older, I got a little bit more comfortable, and then I started doing hypnotherapy training, and I was starting to add more information and more knowledge to my toolbox, so to speak. I noticed that my intuition became much more prominent. So there was a time where, for a period of years, I worked at private colleges, and I was a program advisor. And the ability for me to sense things really, truly came out when I was working with people one-on-one. So when potential students, and usually adults, would come in for a session in order to find about courses, that behind closed doors, that's when things really opened up for me. And 9 times out of 10, the sessions became very emotional for the client, because I was able to tap into the real reason or the fear of why they're in my chair in my office in the first place. And the conversation would become very deep without the intention of being so. But 9 times out of 10, I would have the client look at me in my face and say, I don't know what you just did, but I have never realized the things about me that I just did in the last half an hour or 40 minutes. So that made me kind of go, I know I have this thing, and I see now how it has an impact on people. And my coworkers used to come to my office, and they used to close the door, and it would be like a counseling session. And they always said, Joanna, you are meant to do things. You're meant to help people on a larger scale. But again, coming from a place of not feeling great, I never really truly believed that that was possible. And I actually would always think, well, who am I to make a difference, in the world? But eventually, the universe said, okay, Joanna, well, we're going to make this happen for you, whether you like it or not. And when I lost my job and I was unemployed for about a year, Spirit actually said, you're not supposed to go back. And that's when I got really terrified. And I said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the message really was, this is what you're supposed to do going forward. There's no going back. And I was petrified. It took me a few months to get myself together, and eventually I thought, okay, let me give it a go. If this works, then perfect. But if it doesn't, I can always go to plan B and do what I've always done. So really there's no loss. But the thought of facing that, and the thought of doing this and having possibly expectations of other people that were very different than what I was about to do, it was very terrifying. Because again, coming from a place of being disempowered or feeling disempowered, I felt that if I was going to do this, and it was something that I always felt I needed to do at some point, but I thought if I was going to make the choice to do this, people would leave me. I actually literally thought that people would leave me because of it. So it was very terrifying. But Spirit said, you have to face your fear. So, it took me a while, and I eventually, I don't remember what happened, but there was a moment of clarity where I literally said to myself, okay, I refuse to live in fear for the rest of my life, and I have to do this. And if people are going to leave me because they don't believe in what I truly am feeling I need to do, that they're not meant to be in my life. And as hard as it was for me to say that to myself, I knew that in order for me to feel free, I had to face that fear. Well, it turns out nobody left, and people supported me, and the rest is history. But it was a monumental moment in my life where I stepped into this other world, but it was pushed through circumstances that were beyond my control and a little bit forced upon me, but I would never do it myself. I know I wouldn't, because I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the strength, and I always felt that if, who am I to do this? I have to be this, or that. So does that help a little bit?
Immensely. And I'm just so curious about what that was like in terms of how people responded to you. Was it, did you admit it to people that you were working with, that you're actually doing intuitive readings, that you were even asking, when you actually became a medium? So I actually don't know that about you. I assume it all kind of came at one time.
That's actually interesting because when I took my counseling / hypnotherapy program years and years ago, and this was for my own interest, and then eventually my own interest became a little bit of a part-time thing. So I would see clients in the evenings once in a while I was doing the regular corporate job. And at some point in the back of my mind, I always felt that eventually I would do this for a living when I retire, 55, 60, right? I always felt that I had something that was meant to make people feel more empowered. I always had that or knew that, but I didn't think that I was going to be able to make a living of it. And so when I was working with my clients in hypnotherapy, that's actually where my mediumship started to come out. I literally heard voices saying what direction I should take clients in order for them to have a great experience. And it turned out that every time I took this guidance, and it took me a while to get used to the idea of hearing it, never mind trusting it, but when I started to trust and follow their guidance, the sessions became phenomenal. My clients got incredible results. So I thought, there must be something to it because I'm being guided to do something that I wouldn't normally necessarily think about, but it's producing a result that is way more than what I would have seen in the past. So eventually, it literally switched from being hypnotherapy to getting so much information from spirit that eventually, at one point, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you do readings?" And I laughed because I actually said, "Like, what do you mean? What do you mean readings? I don't know how to read." And then she looked at me. She says, "Joanna, you're a medium." And I looked at her and I said, "What? Like, no." And they said, "Joanna, you're a medium." And at that point, I kind of was like, okay. It took me a while to kind of, because I thought, me? Like, who? Me? Medium? Like, and then eventually I thought, oh, well, okay. And then she said, "Why don't you try doing a psychic fair?" And she said, "Actually, there is one this Saturday, and there is a person you should call." So I thought, oh, God, okay. So I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to get into that. So, I'll try it, but there's no way. Well, I called the person, and the person said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I have only one table left." And I said, oh, God. So I thought, okay, because I said to Spirit, okay, if it's meant for me to be, just guide me. But I kind of didn't want to. But I just wanted to prove it to myself. So anyway, I went in. I was so nervous. But I went in, I had a few readings, and the feedback was absolutely phenomenal. And that's kind of when I realized, like, oh my God, like, I think there is something to this. Now, I'm a very logical person. I am analytical, I overthink, or at least I have a tendency to overthink. So for me to completely trust something that I cannot see, coming from a place of having not very much faith in myself, that was a huge, thing to swallow. And the other part of it was me putting myself out there for people to judge me, where all I always heard was, "Joanna, you are nothing." So there was this tremendous thing standing in front of me. Oh my God, now I'm telling people these things. I don't even know where they're coming from. What if I'm wrong? Then they really are going to find out that I'm crazy and I'm actually a fraud. But it never happened. Yeah. And it didn't happen. And then I started to get calls for people who had a session with me saying they want to see me again. And that's kind of how it started. So that was about 10 years ago, to a point where eventually all my hypnotherapy clients turned into mediumship clients. And it literally switched. But the other thing is, now as everything is coming together, I have always, ever since I was a young girl, I was always fascinated with the mind. I don't know why. It was just a fascination of mine. And I remember when I was about 6 years old, I remember standing in a kitchen. It was back in Poland. That's where I'm originally from. I remember standing in a kitchen, and this just came to me a few years ago, and I remember having a crystal clear thought, and the thought was this: wherever we come from, all we have to do is just think, and we're there. And I'm going, how the hell did I know that? When I was 6, coming from a Catholic background, and none of my family members have this gift that I'm aware of. Certainly there was nothing spiritual about my upbringing. So the fact that I had this, it was just so boom, there it is, and then it was gone. So when I look back at those little things, those very few things, I can now see that I had moments of clarity where it's almost like a blinders were taken off of my eyes just for a moment, just enough to remember, and then it went back again. Does that help?
Yeah, I was wondering, because that was one of the next things that they were talking about, and I think you're starting to touch on it. I was hearing, tell her to talk about the time when she was a little girl and she had no one to turn to.
Yes.
She had nowhere or no one to turn to
Yes.
but up, like to spirit. So it's like I almost want you to say a little bit more. They were asking, what did life look like? How did you talk to spirit back then?
Great.
I didn't know this part about you.
I got chills. So when I was a little girl, when I was growing up, I was actually very, very sad. And it makes me a little bit emotional still, and that's where the disempowerment comes in. So, you know, having grown up in a certain environment, we don't have to go into details why at this point, but I was actually very, very sad. I felt very unloved. I also felt there were moments when I was very young that I wanted to die. And I was just the way I'd felt. And I remember at the same time, about 5 or 6 years old, I remember I was in a kitchen and I was cleaning because my mom was very, she was very frantic about cleaning. And I remember there was nobody in the home, and I remember cleaning, and I was at one point overcome by this incredible sadness. And I remember I said out loud at the age of about 6, God, why am I here? And now as I look back, I go, I don't think that's a typical question that a 6-year-old asks, right? And so there were a few moments where I had this, but for the most part, I don't really remember having a conscious awareness of being guided by spirit, other than I always had a fascination with the afterlife. I always had a fascination with the UFO ever since I was a little girl. And I remember, and I'm an only child, and I remember when I was watching TV with my dad, and my dad would be watching programs about UFO, and I was very, very young, I remember just being sucked into the conversation. I was fascinated by it. So, I mean, maybe that's a normal thing for a 5-year-old. I don't know. I didn't think it is. I don't think it is looking back. But I didn't really have a conscious awareness of something guiding me other than the few moments when I had this clarity. But I also feel, as I think back, is that not having had the conscious awareness is actually what contributed to me feeling very alone. And I needed that. I needed that in order to feel the sense of disempowerment so I could later walk myself through it, pick myself up, and understand the pain so that I can become passionate and helping others overcome it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I didn't have too many, I didn't have spirits. I didn't have any conscious knowledge or awareness that there was something in my room or that I didn't have any of that actually. So that probably just added to the element of feeling very alone. I mean, I might have had, invisible friends, but I have no conscious memory of that whatsoever. None.
See, I love when people like yourself voice the fact that you were a normal kid, because I have other friends who grew up with completely supernatural childhoods. I didn't. You didn't.
Me neither. No.
And I think a lot of people think, I can't develop my intuition. I can't, I'm interested, but that's for other people. And there's a lot of us that, I had to really develop and work at it. I still work at it every single day. And and I love that you hit on the fact that, you're like that living testament of the tough stuff, if we can just turn it into something beautiful and the gift that it's meant to be. Like you were like the shining example of having done that repeatedly in your life. I know we talk about that a lot, and I think that's super inspiring for me, that constant reminder that the challenging stuff happens so that you turn to something beautiful
Yeah.
like you over time.
It gave me the understand the way when I finally got to the point where I was able to look back, and then when I was comfortable enough with Spirit actually said, this is why you had to go through it. You needed to understand what it feels like to be disempowered. You needed to understand it so that you can on your own skin experience this, because then that would connect you to the passion that even when I talk about it, I mean, I literally feel like I'm on fire. And it's not because I want to save the world. I absolutely don't want to save the world. I want people to feel empowered so they can save themselves. But that's what fuels me. But if I truly believe that if I didn't have my own experience, I wouldn't have that passion. And when I do sessions with people, that passion comes through, and I get it all the time. That's what they connect to. They feel it. It's like this energy comes out of me that pours and touches them, and is the energy that does the healing. And yes, there's words connected to it, but it's just this. I'm literally a conduit. We all are, But it's just I really truly believe, and I know that with every single ounce of my being, that if I didn't experience this, I wouldn't be as effective as I am.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, my separated at birth sister. So this is kind of perfect that they're taking you back to this childhood piece, because one of the next questions is about your teenage years, and I'm just literally reading what I was hearing. Yes. Tell her to talk about how it was for her as a teenager in school, around people, around bullying, and around situations with boys. And if they even said, what tough situations did you face that were extremely traumatic? So from a very young age, it was apparent to people outside of me that I was very gifted when it came to remembering things very quickly. So I would remember poems, I would remember songs, I would remember things, I would just spit them out, with having just read them a few minutes earlier. So that became very known to the teachers, the people who were in authority. As a result, I was picked out to be the center of attention. Now, when one is a center of attention because they stand out for something, those who don't feel that way, they feel threatened. Well, I didn't see it that way then, but I absolutely hated being the center of attention because it led to me being bullied. So ever since I was quite young, I was always attacked in school, and I could never understand why. I was not the prettiest, I was not the tallest, I was not the smartest. I could never understand what it was about me. It's almost like I was this thing that people were attracted to in order to abuse me. And I couldn't for the life of me understand. And this went on for years. It went through my entire grade school and their middle school. And it was for years, and nobody did anything about it. It's almost like every time I asked for help, so especially when I was abused by boys, and this went on for months and months and months, I would be, there would be gangs of boys who would attack me, and they would sexually assault me. And they would corner me in dark places, and I remember feeling so helpless. And then I would tell the teacher, and the teacher would say to me, boys will be boys, and that was it. There was nothing done. So I've learned over the years to basically expect that. Expect to be mistreated, expect to be bullied, expect to be abused and emotionally controlled. And physically, it was just something that I got so used to. And on top of growing up in an emotionally abusive environment, it just added to the sandwich of all the experience that I had. So it basically solidified a belief within me that I'm not worthy, I'm only good for one thing, therefore that's what I'm going to get. I'm not worthy of love, and I'm a magnet to abuse. So, and on top of it, nobody hears me when I tell them I need help.
So there were times in my life, many times, where I wanted to die. I wanted to die. And I kept remember saying to God, what is so wrong with me? What is so terrible about me that I attract this? What is wrong? And when I was growing up, incidentally, you know, the way the punishment was back then in the country was, I always interpreted this, at least, you know, these things happen to you, Joanna, because you must have done something. So I always was told that it was, in a roundabout way, my fault. I must have done something. So it just kind of went that way for years and years and years. And, you know, when you feel that way and then you have experiences that basically say, yeah, Joanna, it's your fault, you kind of don't grow up feeling very confident, and you don't want to show yourself, so you kind of learn how to hide. Now, when I got a little bit older, and I didn't know this, but when I got a little bit older, I started to look a certain way, and people didn't like it, and I couldn't understand it, because I never saw myself the way people see me. To this day, I don't. And people would later tell me that I was very intimidating, and I would go, I have no idea what the hell you're looking at, because it ain't me. Because if you actually knew me, you would understand that that is the furthest thing from what you are seeing. So that just drove the rejection over and over. But again, as I look back, I needed to understand it. I needed to feel it. It was. I wouldn't do it again, you know. But at the same time, in a weird way, I am truly grateful for having had those experiences looking back, because there was so much wisdom that comes from it when I look at it from a positive perspective. There are so many things that I've experienced, and 90% of the clients that I come in contact with have shared that experience, so I can relate, and they can relate to me. I'm not just saying, yeah.
Oh, so sorry.
No,
but I know so many people get intimidated by, you know, women like you. You've got this huge following on YouTube, and I get that in my practice sometimes too, that people perceive other people in such skewed ways, and I think it's so inspiring to know what people really go through. It's so disempowering for anybody to look at you or anyone else thinking that you're special and you got where you are because you took every tough thing that repeatedly got handed to you and you turned it into a massive strength. That it just shows people what they can be made of too. There's nothing, I don't think, anything special about you and I, or any, you know, of my colleague friends who do this kind of work.
We're all special. We're all special.
Absolutely, in our very unique way.
Yeah. And the other thing that it really taught me is, because I obviously, because of all the, and listen guys, don't get me wrong, like I'm not saying, oh, Joanna, poor, that's not what I'm not poor Joanna anymore. I am just saying these are the circumstances that have made me who I am, and that's why I do what I do, because I have this passion. That's my drug, literally. That is my drug of choice, is to be able to help empower someone, because I know what that feels like. So what it taught me is, well, obviously I was very critical of myself, but it also showed me that when I look at the people and I am tempted to be judgmental, I go, no, Joanna, remember how people perceive you? Well, you're not that, are you? Therefore, be careful what you project onto others.
Such a good lesson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so hey, they've done good with their questions so far. There's a few funny kind of things. You know, maybe I'll just toss it. Let's see if I was hearing them correctly. Okay, this I might have misinterpreted. But is there a story that you have about when you were traveling like to see somebody and something with the police officer? I was literally seeing I was seeing the word police officer, and they were saying, tell her to talk about the time she was traveling to see somebody, and there was something where you got caught off guard. And they've actually referenced several kind of silly-sounding stories, so we'll see if any of them are triggering a memory.
I can't recall anything about a police officer. I'm sure there's something there, but I can't quite. Nothing is
Anything
coming.
with a boss at work when you
yes,
you were a medium?
Okay.
Because they were saying ask her about the time when she admitted this to her boss at work.
Oh my God! I don't think I told you that, did I?
You haven't told me actually a lot of these stories. You and I end up talking about a lot of other things. So I'm fascinated tonight.
So this is a few years ago. This is when I was starting to kind of figure out, okay, there must be this thing to Joanna that, nobody can see and she knows stuff. Okay, and people come to her and they give her messages. Okay, it's been proven a few times, so, let's might as well just accept it, right? So, here I am in a corporate world, and, I work with the boss, and all of a sudden, over days, I had this person come to me and said, my name is Anthony, your boss knows me, and he kept showing me a specific letter opener to it. I even drew a picture of it. And every time I was in a close proximity with my boss, the frickin' person would come in. And I would be like, what? And I would actually say, I said, like, what do you want from me? I said, there is no freaking way I am going to tell my boss that there is a dead person whose name is Anthony. I don't want to get fired. There's no way I'm doing that, right? So I made a deal with him. So I actually made a deal with him. I said, okay. And I didn't think that was going to happen. But I said, okay, if you want me to give this to him, you make sure that him and I are in the same room and we are alone. Well, guess what? In the next 2 weeks, I walk into the lunchroom and guess who's there? And he's never, ever there. And I go, oh, shit. So, and then he comes again. And I'm like, oh, God. I said, okay. I said, give it to me. He says, just tell him. So I'm like, I'm just going to tell you something about me. I'm a medium. I see things and I hear things. And this gentleman has been with me for weeks. He says his name is Anthony. He's showing me this letter opener, and he wants me to tell you that he is here. Well, the guy looked at me. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. And I go, fuck.
Great, I'm wrong.
And then he says to me, yeah, my wife used to do it. My ex-wife used to do this to me all the time. And I'm like, oh, my God, I think I poked something. Well, I thought, okay, my life is done. I'm over. I'm fired. Well, next day I find out the guy quit. So I was safe. He didn't quit because of me. He just decided to resign. So the timing was that he's not going to fire me because now he's gone. So I was safe. Even though I looked as a fool, I felt like a fool. I was saved. Nothing bad happened. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
So you actually were brave enough.
And I remember days after I said to Spirit, I was mad. I said, why did this happen? Like, why did I misunderstand? What was the purpose of that? And that's when it came to me. And this is what they said. Joanna, your job is to plant the seed. Your job is not to make them believe. That is up to them. That is up to them. What they choose to do with that seed is not up to you. And I just went,
ooh.
Oh, okay then. Well, thank you for not getting my ass fired, at least. What's interesting is that when he made that comment, my ex-wife used to do it to me all the time. I thought, this wasn't news to him. He's used to this. So there might be somebody whose name is Tony Anthony, middle name, and because because maybe he didn't like that, he just said no. I mean, I don't know, right? And sometimes people don't want to admit to things. This person was a financial officer, so very finance-oriented, 3D person, logical person. Sometimes people don't want to admit to stuff because of their position, and I don't know that, but, he may have just said that because he didn't want me to think that he was weird like me, right?
Exactly. Or he remembers 3 days later, which so often happens.
Yeah, no, the way
you were trying to get a message to me, and I couldn't remember until you just kept hitting me with it. And like, oh, it's right in front of my face, but I just couldn't register. Yeah.
And there was a lesson. And so when they said, your job is to plant seed, your job is not to make them believe, they told me that was the exercise. And the exercise was for me not to beat myself up, but to understand that sometimes when I plant a seed, the seed may not be received well, but that is not up to me. Because there's a possibility that if this person comes through, his name is Anthony, it happens to be his father, and he never believed in afterlife, and all of a sudden you have a stranger that says, I have this person who's been with me for 3 months, he's showing me this, he says his name is Anthony, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, life is different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It cracks open a door where a person goes, I don't know if I want to go through that door. But
exactly.
It can't, right? Yeah, I remember, that was one of those moments that I just thought, oh my God, what the hell is that about? Yeah, that was a good one. I'm glad I talked about that because I forgot about that. Yeah, that was funny as I look back, but it was not funny at the moment. Let me tell you, I was mad.
Well, it's a beautiful teaching point, too, just that reminder to, I think probably a lot of people that watch you are healers at heart or very, spiritually oriented, and I bet most everybody listening has got some intuitive abilities, whether they're clear about it or not, and just to see that bravery of it's okay that you don't have to know that you're right all the time, and the steps that you've taken to develop that, I think are invaluable, because I didn't have anyone to tell me these stories, 2 decades ago when these things started happening for me. I felt like I was behind and wasn't getting it, and that's a lesson that's definitely helping a lot of people, I'm sure. It's helping me, so, thank you for that.
And the whole idea of saying these things where I was very much wavering in my own self-worth, the judgment was very terrifying. Now, I'm at the place for the most part where even though it's always going to be a lesson for me to the day that I die, it's going to, it's going to be there's going to be some reminiscence of it from, from my life. But I'm at the point right now, if somebody doesn't want to believe in what I say even if they're actually saying, even on YouTube, even if they make a comment, Joanna, you're full of shit. My comment is always, even if I make a comment, is I absolutely am respectful of your belief system, and I don't hold that against you.
Yeah.
Because I believe we choose to experience certain beliefs based on what it is that our soul wants to accomplish. I won't hold that against you. But does that mean that remarks that are sometimes really mean don't hurt me? No, I'm a human being. Absolutely, I'm a human being. But I put myself out there.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there another silly story that has something to do with a store, a shoe store? Like when you went to a store, and I think they were saying to buy shoes, like an interaction with a manager or something, like maybe somebody who worked there, but they were showing me. I didn't ask her about the time she went to a store, and I swore it was to buy shoes. This was the one that was actually coming in as I was dialing into our call. So I'm like, is it shoes? Is it a manager?
I don't remember shoes in particular. I mean, I've had many situations where I would be in a store and there would be like, oh, okay, there's somebody coming in. Great. But I remember a fairly recent situation where I went to the mall and something...
Yeah, I feel like it's recent, and it did feel like a mall. So
yeah, it sounds to me... All of a sudden, I went to the mall and I just so you guys know, I'm not a shopper. I hate going shopping. Okay, hate is maybe not, that's too strong of a word. I'm a girly, right? I like to look good. Yeah, who doesn't? But I'm not, when it comes to shopping, just take me where I need to get something and let me get the hell out of there, okay? But anyway, I went to the mall, something I needed to buy. And then I clearly felt I needed to go to this one store. Well, it happened to be a jewelry store, right? And so I went in there, and there's all this beautiful silver jewelry. I love silver jewelry. So I'm looking at this ring, and there's a lady that comes behind me, and we start to chat, and there we go. There's a mother coming through, so I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, and I just said the dead mother.
Yeah,
I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, why didn't I read the rest of that about a dead mother? Okay, go ahead.
So I'm kind of going, okay. Okay, I'm going, okay, how am I going to handle this? Because I'll be honest, aside from the fact, the one incident that I talked about at work where the guy looked at me like I had horns coming out of my head. I haven't had a situation where it would have been like, why the hell do I do this? I didn't. I actually have been spared, thank God. Because I actually said to them, if you put me in that position, I'm not going to do it. So it doesn't serve them, to put me in that position. But anyway, so, I picked up a ring. I love the ring. It happened to be on 50% off, so it's like bonus. So we're walking in, I get paid, and I see she has this singing bowl. I go, oh, she must be into some kind of stuff. So I said, do you believe in energy? She's like, yeah, I really need to clean this space. I'm like, okay, this is my ticket, right? So I go, well, there's a lady here behind you. She says, happy birthday. And she goes, what? And I said, she says, happy birthday. She goes, oh, my God, my son's birthday is coming up. How do you know? I said, well, there's this person who says she's your mother. Is your mother passed? Yes. And then it started to flow. So I think the first thing it came was a rose. And she's like, oh, my God, my mother loved roses. She had garden of roses everywhere. And that's where the conversation flew. So anyway, we talked for like 10 minutes, and she hugged me, and she's like, oh, my God, I love this. I could talk about this forever. So that's an example of things that happen. They don't happen they happen at the gym. Oh, here's the interesting story. So I'm a gym girl. I love going to the gym because I used to be quite overweight. So, yeah, I'm a normal person. So what happens is I'll get a message, and it's usually for the burly, big guys. And it's like, oh, shit, here we go. Okay, so a guy walks past me, and I hear, okay, mother, you got to talk. I'm like, oh, my God. So I've learned that when they ping me, it is safe. But I need courage, or takes me some time to get the courage to come up to a 250-pound bulky guy who is, very serious and say, hey, I see dead people, right? So I can't tell you how many times they don't usually pick girls, they pick the guys. I have come up to somebody, and I said, one guy that is so memorable, because he, I used to see him because, you see people at the gym, this big, probably 250 pounds. And I walk up to him and I say, okay, you're going to think this is weird, but I have a dog in spirit, and this dog really wants you to know. The freaking guy started to cry. I'm like, oh, shit. And I'm like, oh, my God, I hope I didn't say anything upset you. He says, you're the first person that made me cry. I said, I'm sorry. I said, what's with the dog? He says, that's my best friend. Died last year. Oh. So I kind of pried him open. And I seem to do that with these men, with women too, but and I guess it's because a lot of the time they're very emotionally closed off. And, here's Joanna prances in the gym, and then she comes in, and it's like, poink, and they just kind of go, they open up. So that is a regular thing now, and I've come to a point, it's like, okay, you ping me, fine, I'll do it. I know there's nothing bad is going to happen to me. I'm just kind of used to it by now. Yeah. But I guess what made it seem weird to somebody else seems pretty normal to me. So that's some of the stories that are starting to come to mind.
Apparently they're wanting you to tell stories tonight, which I'm delighted by.
Perfect.
This is so fun. And I don't know if they're referring to a story you were telling me last week or if this is another one, but they were talking about ask her if she wants to tell you about the time when she went to a medium, and I thought I was hearing and asked her to read her. So that sounds like a little bit different than the story that you were telling me the other day, or maybe it is the same one. And that she asked to be read. I even heard them say it twice.
I remember that. I'm sure it'll come
or
to
unless
me.
you think it's that recent story.
But there's a couple
maybe
of
there's
things.
Something there.
15 or 20 years ago, because my son is 18, 20 years ago, and that happened before I had my son, I went into a medium. Back then, I had no freaking clue that I could do this, none whatsoever. If you told me, I would say, you're drinking something, and it ain't water. And I went to her, and she said to me, she said many things, and she said, you're going to be seeing people you're going to see spirit. You're going to be seeing spirit. Well, I freaking dismissed it. So she told me a lot of things, but she actually said, you're going to be doing this at some point. So I remember that years and years later, it's like, oh my God, she said this. But a week ago, we went to a fair. So there's a fair that happens in Vancouver every year, 2 weeks before school starts. And I've never gone to a psychic at a fair. Well, I was stupid to do that, but it was a good lesson. Anyway, so I went in and I'm talking to my husband. He's like, go ahead. So I'm like, I'm curious. What do these psychics do at the fair? Because they usually have a pretty bad rap, right? That's why I don't like being called a psychic. I actually hate it. So I go in, I sit down, and it's interesting because she lays all these cards, and she says, you're going to have a trip, the regular stuff that anyone could fit anywhere, right? I mean, nothing against her, but I could fit, like everybody could fit what she was saying to me. And then she said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a medium. And she looked at me and she stopped. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wonder what's going on in her head. And she says, you mean to tell me you connect with the other side? And I said, yes. And she's like, how long have you been doing this? I said, well, probably about 10, 15 years. Oh. And I could see the wheels turning in her head, and I could see how all of a sudden her energy changed. But that's quite normal, you know, when you go see a hairdresser and you're a hairdresser yourself, you're going to, you know, it's a bit of an interesting thing, right? But she was very thrown off. And then she said to me, she said, so you tell me that you hear and see, how do you work? And I said, you know, I see and I feel, hear, and I see them. And she says, I really have a hard time believing that you actually do see them. And I'm like, well, everybody perceives differently. I said, I can't read cards. And she's like, okay, that's true. I said, but by the way, who's the person behind you? She says, she's a mother. She's holding a cat. He's like, no. I said, no. I mean, she thought I was talking about somebody who's behind her, like a loving person. And I said, no. This person is a spirit. She calls herself a mother. Could be a mother figure like a grandmother. She's holding a cat. Who is she? She's like, no. And then she walked away. And then she said, oh, no, before that she says, can I have your card? And I said, sure. She says, oh, Joanna, I heard of you. And I'm like, I wonder what she heard. And
people are noticing you everywhere you go now.
And I didn't want to tell her I'm a medium because that can throw a person off, and that wouldn't be fair to her. And I actually said it would not be fair to you if I did that. When a client calls me, I want nothing from them, zero, until I get through my stuff first, right? So, you know, I don't know if she was thrown off, if she was scared. It was actually quite interesting because then she kind of dismissed me. She kind of, you know, left me. But that bothered me a little bit because I'm thinking, you read cards, you believe in the afterlife, yet you are telling me that you don't believe that I actually do this. Like, I kind of went, okay, that's kind of weird. And then and then my mother-in-law was with me, and she says, okay, Joanna, let me guess. You're going on 2 trips. You have a great husband. I said, yes. And she told me all the other stuff that she would hear from a psychic, from a fair. And I thought, that's what, and I'm
generic,
not,
typical response.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that every psychic is like that. I absolutely do not mean that at all, because there's some phenomenal psychics and card readers, and on YouTube, they're amazing. But I now understand why people have disrespect for psychics because of that, and that's why I actually abhor the word being psychic, because it puts me in this corner, and I am literally. Psychic is only a tiny bit of what I do. There's so much of other stuff that I do. And we're all psychics. We are all psychics. That's the beauty of it. But
well, can I tell you what's hysterical?
Yeah.
One, I just looked down. We have 2 minutes and 22 seconds
my
left.
God, that's crazy.
And there is only one question left with literally, it rolls right into what you were just talking about. I'm just reading what they're saying verbatim. Ask her what she's going to become in the next decade and beyond. How does she want to grow and transform people's lives down the road? So you've got 2 minutes to end on a really beautiful note.
No pressure. So the way it's interesting because you and I talked about this. I'm being pushed to evolve, and it's, you know, so what I see is I've always felt every time I close my eyes, I see myself on a platform and giving information in order to empower people and inspire people. How that comes through, how the information looks, where it comes from, in what context, I have no clue other than I know it's going to be guided by spirit. So what I see myself is being able to reach so many more people in order to help as many people as I can at one time. And doing this work one-on-one can only take me so far because I can only help handful of people at the same time. So I'm definitely being pushed towards doing not bigger, but just on a I don't know if platform is the right word, but just doing it on a scale that allows people to hear and see me hundreds at a time.
Thousands, tens of thousands.
Well, you see that.
As you already are on YouTube.
Yeah. So, and that's over the next actually few months, it will evolve. And my work is really about, helping people transform their limited belief systems and transform those into strengths. Because every fear that we have, and I don't mean the fear that you have to run away from a lion, that's very valid. The fears that are not real, or the fears that are really don't happen, is every fear can act as a strength. And I believe my purpose and certainly my passion is to help people turn those fears into their strengths. So that's really what I'm passionate about. So when people come in for a reading, 99% of the time, this is what it turns into. The whole psychic stuff, yes, I mean, predictions are very disempowering. I believe that we can change our future for the most part. But that's why I don't really like predicting hard predictions, because they're actually very disempowering and they leave people choiceless. So,
well, that's perfect. You just literally hit the 55-minute mark. Bravo.
Okay.
That was well done by your guides and mine. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you so much. I hope
amazing.
You guys like it. And do you think we could do it again? I love this. I love this stuff. I hope you guys like it too. Stephanie, are you up for it?
Oh, I already told you I do this every day with you. And apparently the guides have plethoras of questions, so I can just show up.
I think the more people understand me, the more go, oh my God, she's just like a normal person, and she
Exactly.
feels what I feel, and it's like, yes, I'm just like anybody else. Absolutely. I never put myself on a pedestal, because that's a dangerous place, right? It's number one, it's too high to fall down, but number two, there's just no need. But this was interesting. I hope you guys like this. Join us in 2 weeks for, I think we're going to have live readings, but I will send that information out on newsletter. So go ahead and subscribe on my webpage. And until then, talk to you soon. Bye.